Hello, folks. Welcome to the show. My name is Jack Chow. I'm hosting the East-West show with lots of pride. It was about a week ago or something. We had a discussion about the philanthropic efforts to extend it to many different countries, such as Mexico, such as Cambodia. And with my good friend, Mr. Pierre Mainguy, welcome to my show.
Thank you.
We touched a little bit about the subject of their philanthropic efforts into the areas, or even the most backward areas of Cambodia. And so far, the response is huge. It's hugely positive. And they are helping lots of people make a difference of their lives. So once again, I have to invite you to come back here because I have received lots of response from my audiences, my beloved audiences. They send me emails asking if there's any stories. They like to hear some stories. Some little, those little tiny stories that probably says more than the slogan itself.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Right, and by the way, if my dear audience, any of you would continue to write to me, here's the address. It's jack@edimediainc.com. EDI Media Inc. Jack, all together is one word, jack@edimediainc.com, or tellmydj@gmail.com. So the same thing. And I promise that I get back to you or get the information you need or accept your suggestions or even criticism, all right? So, all right, good. Yes, welcome once again to my show.
Thank you, Jack, for having me again today, and I'm thrilled that your audience found an interest in the elements of stories that we began to address when we last met. This is very exciting, and thank you again for having me on the show today.
All right. They like the concept of helping, and they know that we are in a world that is not even yet, far away from even. We're better off. Our well-being doesn't mean that there are no people who are suffering below the poverty lines, maybe way below the poverty lines, right? So to start with, though, I have probably bring you one more time about the background of Mr. Mainguy, a young guy, as you can see, right? Probably not even, barely half my age. Yet, since 6 years ago, when he started looking for a job, he found this philanthropic area is his target, and his future lies in there. And with the guy, his name is, what is it, Whaley?
John Whaley.
John Whaley, yeah, John Whaley, last name Whaley, John Whaley. They started this foundation, the organization called the CFI, Community First Initiative, right?
That's correct.
So, and from there on, for the past 6 years, their efforts have been recognized, lots of people have been benefited from, and then we're now here giving the credit to those guys, typically to Mr. Mainguy, Mr. Whaley, for what they have done. And I know there are hundreds of thousands of them who are doing the same thing, right?
Absolutely.
So how you, once again, tell me the story that make you started.
Absolutely. Well, it all started when I met John in 2007 at a cocktail party and in Pasadena, of all places. And we started talking about, that conventional exchange of words. What do you do? What do you do? At the time, I was working for a group of private investors called the Pasadena Angels and their venture capital counterparts.
I see.
And I was focusing on investments in early stage startup companies strictly in Southern California. It was a very good training, a very good school to learn more about how to execute efficient projects and programs. And I always found a lot of satisfaction through that work, even though we were not at the time, I was not at the time focusing on the world's poor. But there was something about helping an entrepreneur achieve their vision of a brighter tomorrow, bring a new product to the market, finding solutions to problems that will ensure the viability of any startup.
Of course, yeah, of course.
And help them bring their projects to the next level by working with the Pasadena Angels and the venture capital community in Southern California. And I shared with John at that party how we, as a group of private investors would help those individuals. And he just asked me a very simple question. He asked, well, Pierre, that's wonderful, congratulations, but have you thought about doing just that, where it would mean the difference between life and death, essentially? And it could have such an impact in people's lives that you could really help them move up in life. So that's how it started.
That's such an angle, such a sharp point, right?
And what happened then is that we had breakfast, we talked about it, and next thing I knew, I was with $10,000 in cash and a one-way ticket to Phnom Penh at age 23, going over to Cambodia with basically the only requirements from my very limited number of donors at the time was to do good in the world and help.
Literally, you're going there with $10,000 in pocket, donated by Mr. Willie.
Yes.
And looking for holes to fix.
Exactly.
Right. However, the point that gets my attention so much is that last time I mentioned, that's why I wanted to get stories about it, is that you guys, the two of you put together, it seems to me, something like do the philanthropic activities in a entrepreneurial way.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that is the brand new aspect we're talking about. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
I guess a leopard cannot lose its spots. And being from a private equity startup environment, and also being so fresh out of school, this was basically the only thing I knew. I was not trained by large philanthropies about writing, fancy grants or anything. I was much more pragmatic and hands-on because of my previous experience, however limited it was. Again, I was just 23 when I hopped on that plane.
But the start was good. The start was so good, and by now, after 6 years later, you probably already have your whole concept established and built, if not vastly developed, right? And this is so recognizable at this moment, though. When I say about philanthropic activities, people tend to be on a freelancing basis, right? So here and there, so it's one shot and then they go.
That's right.
Right. So how to organize it into a systematic project?
Absolutely.
A program that maybe in your case, act like seeds planted.
Exactly.
Right, and wait for grow. That is the beauty of it. And tell my audience that part, please.
Sure, with the greatest pleasure.
I know in general there are people who are in need of help. There are so poor people, so on and so forth. They're sick, there are so on and so forth. But to get that idea, to make the effort, like you $10,000, it was not just $10,000, it was 10,000 seeds. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, planted. That concept, how did you start it with that stories? You have any stories to tell? My audience is buying stories.
Absolutely. I think you're raising a very essential point, which is essentially there's a big difference in the world of philanthropy out there. And basically we can look at 3 different areas of philanthropy. And I think that's where I'll start because those are really different mindsets. You have charity, which is basically the handout. It's giving someone something to someone. It is remarkably important, especially in a setting of relief, post-earthquake. You're not going to ask villagers to buy equity in a project and work hard when they lost their home, they're still looking for their relatives and so on. That's when you just have to give a mosquito net, a bottle of water. And then there is the notion of development. Development is a slightly different angle and it looks at the long-term impact of programs. And what I first did, coming out of my skyscrapers in downtown Los Angeles, I realized that I would not have all the answers innately within me coming over to Cambodia.
Of course, yeah.
So the story starts with the notion of a journey towards the other. And that's the beginning of the story of Community First. It's taking that initial step to go towards those people who have so much to teach you.
You mentioned there are 3 different categories. I know there's number 1, the kind of like church meals stuff,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
You cook the meal, anybody, whoever comes in and then enjoy the meal, God bless you, that's it. Right? And what's the second kind? What's the third kind?
I would place Relief is a sort of charitable project, but
Like
for
the
post-earthquake,
post-disasters.
post-tsunami. So those are different types of activities. And then there's development. And so those
I
are
see.
really 3 different
Oh, I
areas
see, I
of
see.
charitable work with that whole notion of, that question, that very vast question, how can I help? Where does one begin to answer that?
Yeah, let me try to digest a little bit. Probably my audience need time too in digesting the 3 different categories. Being doing number one, of course, everything is good. All the 3 are
course.
good.
And essential.
It calls for good-hearted people to do that, right? So for those church meals, what you do is that you do for the purpose of doing it because people need that.
That's
and
right.
then you cook the meal, nice meal, call on people to come in to enjoy the meal. That's the end of the day. And then next week, the same thing, right?
That's right.
And the post-disaster kind of activity has a target that as soon as you come back to where you were, you're okay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you're bringing people back to where they were.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Where they have been or had been.
That's right.
And then for development is that you're trying to put some seed money, plant it into the soil, let it grow into some kind of a tree, a fruit tree or whatever. So that takes care in the long run for the future, right?
That's right.
That's the number 3.
It's going above and beyond.
It goes above and beyond. Yes, so very good, very good. So back to my audience. Today, we're doing another discussion about philanthropic activities, and we're talking about philanthropic activity and entrepreneurship combined. With these combined, first we analyzed about the 3 kinds: the church meal kind, the post-disaster kind, and the development kind. So they have, even though belonging to the same nature, but different categories. Joining me in the discussion is a role model, Mr. Pierre Mainguy. He's a young guy, only 29 years old, yet 6 years already involved in the great cause of nowadays, of our contemporary time. All right, so stay with us. We'll be right back.